Dear viewers, immigration rules are frequently changing, which is very important for migrant community and all of us. Why won't the world tackle the refugee crisis? Are the High Court judges under pressure by government policy? How deporting people silently? Why immigration detention center misbehaves with detainees? Is the immigration enforcement used by government lawfully? How immigrants are victim of domestic violence? What will be the UK relationship with the European Union after Brexit? Fear spreads. Protests across the world. We should know the reality. I try to collect all the latest immigration news regularly. If you like this video, please stay with us to follow my Facebook page and YouTube channel, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share with your friends. Let's go to the news. The UK must step up to its responsibilities in helping to tackle the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean. The Independent makes no apology for continuing to report the terrible drownings on Europe's southern coasts and our demand for more effective action to avoid them. Disclosure of patient data to the UK Home Office must stop. Immigration enforcement should never undermine the right to health. The BMA's annual representative meeting in June called for the NHS to stop handing over non-clinical details of patients, including their addresses, to the UK Home Office for immigration enforcement purposes without consent of patients and knowledge of their GP. The motion brings into sharp focus the undermining of doctor-patient confidentiality and the insufficient attention to evidence in policy making. It's time to recognize the truth: a trade deal with India means concessions on immigration. Since 2010, there has been a decline of more than 50% in Indian international students coming to the UK. Court of Session inflicts latest immigration defeat on Theresa May. Prime Minister Theresa May's miserable time in the courts is continuing, with Scottish appeal court judges finding in favour of an Indian citizen she tried to deport. 3 judges at the Court of Session found in favour of Vishal Zuri against the Secretary of State for the Home Department, the post held by Theresa May at the time Zuri was refused leave to remain in Scotland with his British fiancée. Home Office orders detailed assessment to help plan post-Brexit immigration system. The government has asked an independent body to carry out a detailed assessment of the impact of EU migration as ministers look to establish the UK's post-Brexit border controls. Home Secretary Amber Rudd has asked the Migration Advisory Council to set out what impact a cut in numbers would have on the economy, including on particular regions and sectors. And she promised there would be a transitional period to allow British businesses to adjust to the new rules. I'm scared every night. Asylum seeker sleeping rough in Leicester Parks tells of her constant fear of being attacked. I'm scared every night. Every day I'm crying and I'm stressed. I don't have anywhere to go. An asylum seeker sleeping rough in the city has spoken about her nightly fear of being attacked. The 26-year-old from Eritrea in Eastern Africa is among the refugees attending City of Sanctuary each week for free food. She said she had been kicked out of her home since her application for asylum was rejected, and she was sleeping rough in parks while awaiting deportation. She said, "I'm scared every night. I have to sleep in Victoria Park, sometimes Abbey Park. I'm scared I might get raped at night. Every day I'm crying and I'm stressed. I don't have anywhere to go. I only get £10 a week in the form of gift cards, not even cash. That isn't fair." Immigration: this policy is both cruel and unnecessary. 5 years on, the Tories' family migration income threshold is continuing to make people's lives needlessly miserable. 41% of the population earn below the £18,600 threshold, one of the world's most restrictive. It is there because of a political commitment to bring down net migration figures at any cost, a policy based on arbitrary numbers rather than either economic need or human compassion. The government has had 5 years to meet its target and failed, and it is unlikely that it can succeed even if free movement within the EU ends. Jeremy Corbyn: wholesale EU immigration has destroyed conditions for British workers. The Labour leader has told Andrew Marr that his party wants to leave the single market. Mass immigration from the European Union has been used to destroy the conditions of British workers, Jeremy Corbyn said today. Home Office breached woman's human rights in Yarlswood punishment room. Kenyan asylum seeker wins High Court case after being placed in segregation for 28 hours in immigration removal centre. A Kenyan asylum seeker has won a landmark court victory after the Home Office was found to have acted unlawfully and in breach of her human rights by locking her up in segregation in a so-called punishment room for too long while she was in detention. It is the first time that the Home Office's policy of placing some immigration detainees in segregation has been challenged. Several thousand of the 30,000 people detained every year are placed in segregation, according to data gathered by the charity Medical Justice in its report about segregation, a secret punishment. Many of those held in immigration removal centres have committed no crime. EU nationals can register to enter UK during Brexit transition. Amber Rudd reassures businesses after junior minister's statement that freedom of movement will end in 2019. EU nationals will still be able to come to the UK during a transitional period after Brexit but will have to go through a registration and documentation process, Amber Rudd has said. New Home Office policy guidance for British nationality. The Home Office today published a new collection of guidance documents used by the UK Visas and Immigration Service when deciding applications for British nationality. These seem to have replaced the nationality instructions with, it seems, no guidance on what has been carried over, changed or dropped from the nationality instructions. Supreme Court confirms that burden for proving marriage of convenience rests with Home Office. In unanimously allowing the appeal, the Supreme Court ruled that the burden of proof of establishing a marriage of convenience falls on the Home Office. All-Ireland visa needed for graduates post-Brexit, says University Vice-Chancellor. Speaking to Times Higher Education, the Vice-Chancellor of Ulster University, Paddy Nixon, has said an all-Ireland work visa should be introduced for students after they graduate. Mr. Nixon also urged the Irish and UK governments to tackle the challenges facing universities in the post-Brexit era. Immigration Minister: freedom of movement will end at point of Brexit in March 2019. EU citizens will still be allowed to come to live and work in UK after Brexit, Home Secretary reveals. EU citizens will still be allowed to come to the UK to live and work after Brexit as long as they register with the Home Office, Amber Rudd has announced. British newlyweds spent 26 hours in airport detention because the groom is Muslim. A British newlywed couple arriving in the United States for their dream honeymoon claim they spent 26 hours in airport detention before being put on a plane back to London because the groom is Muslim. UK government promises skilled immigration of international talent will continue post-Brexit. The UK government has commissioned a study into the impact of EU migration on the UK economy. But it won't report until 6 months before the Brexit deadline. Amber Rudd: a post-Brexit immigration system that works for all. We can control migration from the EU while still attracting the best and brightest. The UK government has been clear that it wants to use the opportunity of leaving the EU to design a future immigration system that works in the best interests of the country. Theresa May's immigration target is absurd, amateurish and arbitrary, says Lib Dem leader Vince Cable. Former business secretary says PM's tough stance on immigration has backfired. Sir Vince Cable has accused Theresa May of being obsessed by an arbitrary target to cut immigration. warning that her posturing has fueled a dangerous and misleading impression that the issue is out of control. Good news, UK Home Office announced changes to family migration rules. Bretton Bucks Immigration is delighted to inform readers that the UK Home Office has announced changes to the UK family migration rules. The newly amended rules should be a positive change for families and spouses who were adversely affected since 2012. Current family migration rules. In 2012, the UK Home Office introduced a minimum income threshold. This minimum income threshold requires a minimum income of £18,600 for sponsoring a spouse or partner. The amount rises to £22,400 for also sponsoring a child and an additional £2,400 for each further child. The outcome since was that many families and partners were split up. Bretton Bucks have heard many heartbreaking stories, as many families and partners were not able to meet these harsh financial requirements. Ruling by the Supreme Court on the UK family migration rules. Earlier this year the Supreme Court ruled in a case of et al. The judgment upheld in principle the minimum income rule imposed by the UK government. The ruling, however, called upon the government to change the rules to ensure that the best interest of affected children is given primary consideration in decisions. The ruling also said that alternative sources of income should be taken into account where the British spouse is not able to meet the minimum income. New UK family migration rules. The new family migration rules announced by the UK Home Office will come into effect on the 10th of August 2017. In short, the rules are amended as follows. 1. When an application does not meet the minimum income threshold requirement, the best interest of the child should be taken into primary consideration. 2. The child included in a successful application will be granted the same route to settlement as their parent. This could be a 5-year or 10-year route to settlement. 3. If the sponsor does not meet the minimum income threshold, and there are exceptional circumstances that could have very harsh consequences for any of the parties, the Home Office should consider alternative incomes of the applicants. 4. If the applicant cannot meet the rules, the decision-maker should consider whether there are exceptional circumstances which would render a refusal of the application a breach of Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. 5. Should an application be successful based on the new considerations, it will put the applicants on a 10-year route to settlement. Should the applicant, at a later stage, be able to meet the financial requirements, they can apply again for the 5-year route to settlement. What should affected families do? It is expected that it will take the Home Office some time to work through the backlog of about 5,000 family migration applications that were placed on hold in the interim. Families who previously were not able to meet the minimum income threshold requirement should get in touch with Bretton Bucks Immigration. Persons who have applications on hold may also want to submit further evidence to meet the new rules for alternative sources of income. We also recommend that the impact of any children affected be highlighted in any future applications. We are confident that with the relaxation in the decision-making, we will be able to assist most clients and ensure a successful outcome. Thank you for staying with me. See you in the next video.